and with substance abuse, addiction, and having gone through the issues of recovery, and we want to stop the stigma, and so this is a big part of that, so we call it Our Voices. And today we have Jennifer Tucker, who is a young lady who I met in November at the Next Door. Remember, I told you that I had gone there to visit it, and we had a great tour, and Jennifer told us all about kind of what had happened to her and what brought her to the Next Door and what she does there. So she was kind of reached out and said, I would love to, meet the coalition, and I'll talk if you'd like me to. And I said, sure, we would love to hear that. So if you would, please welcome Jennifer Tucker, and she's going to tell us about kind of where you've been, where you're at, and we welcome you to the coalition.
I'm really excited to be here. This is weird for me because for the most part, when I tell this story, I'm in front of a room full of addicts. So every single person in there knows exactly what I'm talking about. I'm gonna leave out some of the scarier stuff because it's stuff that's really hard to identify. I'll lead with, I was born into a family with a parent who was severely addicted to we call him a garbage can addict, whatever, primarily crack, and another parent who was so codependent that she thought as long as we provided the house and all the bills were paid, everything else is okay. But it wasn't. There was exceptionally scary things that happened, and by the time I was 16, I was an actual alcoholic. Walking through this high school with a bottle of apple juice that was actually Jim Beam. And I thought that was normal. When I was 17 is when it really got bad. I got hit head on by a drunk driver. I was sober. And it caused permanent whiplash in my neck, some disintegrating discs in my lower back, no cartilage in my foot, in my ankle. And this was back before they were really pushing that opiates were addictive. So they gave me a prescription. And they kept giving me a prescription for the next 15 years. So as soon as I had my first opiate that night at the hospital, which I'll never forget, because it's hard to explain, it was like a light switch. Like I was already into it, figuring out that the alcohol and marijuana, whatever I could get my hands on, make me not have to worry or feel about what's going on at home or what's going on at school or whatever. And when I got to the hospital that night, they gave me a couple painkillers out of a vacuum pack seal, and it was like a light bulb, like shut it down, everything else is over, that's it, I'm done, sign me up. And it started from there, and it progressed to a point where I'm surprised that I was able to function, but I was the worst kind of addict. I was a functioning addict. I'm not the kind of addict, I'm not the kind of person that you look at and you go, she is a junkie. Nope, nobody thought so, but it was bad. I had a good job, made $65,000 a year, so I was able to afford it. My doctors kept giving it to me. Cool, keep going. And I lived this way for about 12 years. And only the people that were close to me had any idea. And I was so afraid because of the stigma to ever tell anybody. I thought about getting help, but man, if I go to rehab, it's gonna be marked on my record forever. How am I ever gonna get a job again? How am I ever gonna go back to Verizon? They're gonna know. I can't go on my health insurance, so no. I don't need to get help. And I just kept going until, as happens with every single addict, you hit a wall of your own creation. And they ended up letting me go after 13 years because of stuff that I was doing. Nodding out my phone calls, calling out, just leaving for a half hour, whatever, I didn't care. I was at a point emotionally where I was not suicidal, but I would have been okay if I died. Nobody would miss me. I wouldn't miss me. What difference would it? That last little grip of reality that I had fell away. And I got to the point where I was doing, I'm not gonna tell you guys all the amounts, but I was doing enough that I shouldn't have been able to walk. But not only could I walk, I could smile, I could interact. after I lost that big job with that much of an addiction, I'll put it to you this way. I was spending about $45,000 a year on drugs. Easily. There's only one way to feed that kind of habit. And I happen to know some people who move some real big stuff. And I was a single white upper middle class female with no record. So I'm a perfect target. And they use me to transport stupid amounts of drugs. Now, I chose to not know what was in the box, but I'm not stupid. I knew what was in the box. And I did this for about a year and a half. Nobody ever paid any attention to me because I looked just like every other girl driving down the road. Well, what I didn't know was that the DEA was paying attention to us. And one day, I just come back from California on their behest after having tried to get a regular job because I was like, okay, I'm done with this. Like, there's something wrong here. They're making me uncomfortable. They're trying to make me do stuff that I don't want to do. I've had more than one gun pointed at my head. And within 12 hours of me getting a real job, somehow they knew and called me and said, no, you can't do that. You have to go to California right now. And when these type of people tell you that type of stuff, you go, you should probably do that because they do know where I live and they know where my family lives. And okay, I'll go. So I quit that job and went. And within 12 hours of being back here, I was pulled over with 2.5 kilos of heroin in the car, which again, I legitimately didn't know was heroin. I didn't know until they did the test. I was like, oh, that's what we're carrying. Okay, why the hell they gave an opiate addict heroin? I'll never be able to tell you, but... And I got arrested, and I was so insane from my addiction that I was 100% sure I was going home that night. I did not go home that night. I did not go home for quite a few nights. They took me back to my house, tore it apart, but they already knew everything. See, the difference with local law enforcement busts is you happen to find drugs. They already knew the drugs were in the car. They knew where I got them. They had watched me load them. So there was no questions for them to ask me because they already knew everything. They asked me to test my honesty, but other than that, they were like, we know what's going on. They took me to jail, detoxing, mind you, because I was doing so much. So I'm sitting in jail detoxing. They moved me from Metro to the federal building, sit there for another 11 hours. Then they moved me to Kentucky because there's no female federal holding facilities in Tennessee. Or there wasn't, that was moving that day anyway. So I had no access to family, friends, anything because I'm hours away. And they throw me in a jail that has no medical services for addicts. So I detox on a mat. First time ever being incarcerated. Surrounded in a place that I don't know, people I don't know, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through. And it still didn't wake me up. Now, when you first get in jail, you can't just walk up to somebody like you see in the movies and be like, hey, can I get some? No, they don't know who you are. You have to be there for a little while. 2 weeks later, I was still trying to find stuff. And one of my cellmates, which the pod we were in was all federal girls, and a few county and state that were there for longer term. She basically did a spiritual slap and was like, are you stupid? You're facing 2 counts of 10 years to life right now, and you still want to get high? And I'm like, there might be something to that. And we had a prayer session. I was saved again that night. And we started in our pod because one of the things when they do the statistics about how many females there are that they leave out is that females don't get access to all the same stuff because there's so few. So when there's NA meetings or AA meetings or anger management meetings or even church, they have to do the male separate from the females, and the females don't get to go all the time. And if they fill up on the few females that they can fill, well, then just that pod gets to go and not that pod. And who cares? Except when you're starting to try to come back to life, those meetings in that church, it's important. So we started having our own. We're like, whatever, you don't have to call us, we're gonna have church in here. We made our pod a clean pod. And every single new girl that came in, what you got on you? You got 3 choices. You can swallow it, you can flush it, or you can put yourself back on the door and go to one of those other pods where they'll let you do whatever you want to do. But you ain't doing it in here because this is safe. And we started having just unbelievable sessions where the stories that I heard, I still translate now to the girls that I counsel. The judge had told me, and let me tell you, if you've never experienced this, the most embarrassing thing in your life is walking through the halls of a building and in front of a courtroom, especially a courtroom that has your family, shackled. Ankles, arms, belly, all that. And they had never seen me like that because, well, I'd never been in jail. Judge said, you can only go to rehab. Because the prosecutor had said, I'm a danger to myself and to everybody else, to the community. And I'm like, me? Really? But I was. Because the people that I met in jail and subsequently rehab, they would tell me, oh, I'm from this town. And I'm like, ooh, I know I made deliveries up there. So I helped. And then there's guilt that comes with that. It's a whole... Anyway. So, kept going on. And he said, you can only leave when you get into rehab. Well, then there comes the problem of getting into rehab. Because let me tell you, they don't answer the phone. Maybe a prepaid call from jail, but they literally will hang up on you, ghost the phone, ignore it, wait till answer, and then hang up. The only place to answer for me was the next door. And it was like God woke me up out of my bed that day. They came in, and they don't pass messages along to inmates. It's not a normal thing. One of the COs came over and said, hey, Tucker, call your lawyer. Okay. So I did, and he said, one of the ladies told me about the next door, and I was like, oh, I remember hearing about them because they talk about it in circles on the street. They answered the first time. Matter of fact, they answered every time. It got to the point where they knew who I was, and I tell them, hey, if you just hit 1, you don't have to listen to all that other stuff, and they knew to, and they would. Every question, I had a bed date in 10 minutes. I was so motivated that was where I needed to be, that the 6-week waiting period to get my grant, what's that? That's fine. I've already been in here for a while. Who cares? One of the other rehabs eventually answered and was like, oh, we've got a bed date for you a week earlier. Nah, I don't want that. God wants me to go there. What's another week? Come on. So I waited it out and I went to the next door. And it was like, I had to ask myself, and honestly, I tell this to the girls, I'm like, did I just walk into a cult? Because they're so happy. And they seem to care. Because they'd be like, oh, it's only going to be 5 minutes. I just went to jail. It took me a week to get a sick call. 5 minutes is cool, y'all. Like, I'm good. And every single person that I interacted with, they didn't shove their faith down my throat, but they made me think about it. They provided therapy, dual diagnosis, which is so unbelievably important because every single person I was incarcerated with was an addict. Not just 80%, every single one. And almost every one of them had something else. Most commonly PTSD. Or, like what I have, CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which means that I went through more traumas than most people could ever imagine over the course of my life. And it reacted in a whole bunch of different ways. I also have opioid use disorder. And once I graduated from the next door, I'm like, you know what? I think this might be the place for me. Because they kept telling me, you have a voice, people listen to you. You should come back and talk to the girls. And I'm like, okay, whatever, who cares about me? And I went through their outpatient program, both tiers. And now, every single Tuesday, I go and I lead an NA meeting for all the girls. And one of the things that I ask every week, because there's new girls coming in all the time, one of our principles in the NA program is principles before personalities, which means we may not get along, but we're all here on the same tip. We all care about the same things. So, let me ask you guys a few questions. You don't have to raise your hands, but you're welcome to if you want to. How many of you have missed a meal because you would rather get drugs or because you needed drugs more? One meal. How many have missed a whole day? How many have not paid a bill? How many have not paid court fines? How many have not gone to court? How many have been to jail? How many of you have had a gun pointed at your head? How many of you have had more than one gun pointed at your head? How many of you have been beaten? How many of you have been robbed? How many of you have been raped? Every single girl in there raises their hand at least once, but the vast majority of them raise their hand for the whole time. And it's a very bring everybody together experience, because these are the things that you want to talk about. You don't go around like, I've had 12 guns pointed at my head and I just kept going back for more. That's not something that you have to talk about in normal conversations. You're supposed to be ashamed, but I'm not anymore. Because every girl that hears that is like, she went through what I went through. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Whatever she understands, I'm not alone. And so they keep coming back, they stay. They come back for the next Tuesday and the next Tuesday and the next Tuesday. They tell me, oh, I'm getting out on Monday, but I asked him to leave until Tuesday so that I could come to your meeting. And I'm like, yes, keep coming back for more. And the power of sharing those things with those women changes their lives, because I'm not the only one who did all of that degrading stuff. And wait a minute, there's a chance for you to do other? And then usually what really gets them is the fact that I'm still facing a 7 to 9 year prison sentence. I'll go up for sentencing in June. At that point, I'll be 20 months clean and probably working at the next store and still facing that time. People are like, how do you handle that? I'd be high or I'd run away. Nope, I did what I did and I deserve to be punished. But if God puts me there, it's for one of two reasons. Either there's somebody in that building that needs my help, or somebody there that's gonna help me. And that's it. He'll only keep me there as long as he needs me there. And I'll be right back here doing what I'm doing. And now I'm here talking to you guys, which is just crazy. But thank y'all for listening, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.